I'd like to start by thanking the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Armenia and the ORF team, as well as their partners, for hosting us today. And welcome to this timely discussion on the role of trade and transport connectivity in promoting regional cooperation. In today's interconnected yet deeply fragmented world, cross-border trade and the infrastructure that supports it have become central not only to economic growth, but also to diplomacy, development, and peace. For decades, international trade has been a vehicle for lifting countries out of poverty, linking producers and consumers across borders, and building trust between nations. Efficient transport networks, harmonized customs processes, and inclusive trade policies form the backbone of this system. And when well designed, these systems can empower smaller and developing economies like Yemen to participate more fairly in global markets. But we are at a crossroads. The world is witnessing a troubling erosion of faith in international institutions and multilateral frameworks, institutions that have historically helped to level the playing field for less developed countries, particularly in sectors like trade. Their ability to mediate, support, and regulate trade cooperation is being questioned just when we need them most. Diplomacy in this context has a renewed role, not only in negotiating trade agreements, but in building the confidence and trust required to support regional and global connectivity. Strategic infrastructure, trade corridors, and regional cooperation frameworks are not merely technical projects. They are diplomatic tools that can foster peace, promote resilience, and drive sustainable development. We will discuss these themes during the session with our esteemed panelists today, and I will start with His Excellency Mr. Vahan Kostanyan, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Armenia. It's been valuable to learn from the various sessions of the dialogue today, and particularly impressive for me has been to hear about Armenia's commitment to peace, echoed throughout the comments from your ministers this morning, especially given that Armenia faces unique geographical and geopolitical challenges. How has Armenia navigated these challenges to improve trade and transport connectivity?
Thank you very much. And before answering to your question, let me comment the energy and resilience of those who stayed for 6 p.m. session. But coming to a question, as you rightly mentioned, the geographical and geopolitical challenges are huge that we are facing. But in the same time, the question is what we are doing with these challenges, whether we are sitting down and just complaining that we have geographical challenges, that we are a landlocked mountainous country with no access to sea, or we're trying to get solutions and to transfer the challenges into the opportunities. Of course, when you're looking to a broader map from Europe to China, you might see that one of the few bottlenecks on the logistical chain is the South Caucasus and also Armenia, because of a too close border with two of our neighbors, Azerbaijan and Turkey. But in the same way, this is also an opportunity for us to reach the opening of the communications and to develop the interconnectivity and interdependence. Our strategic belief and the vision of opening of the communications was presented today in the morning during Prime Minister Pashinyan, and we do believe that with the opening of communications, we will be able to create additional interdependencies in the region, which will promote stability and peace. And sometimes, and especially nowadays, there are too many political issues around the world, probably solutions, and when political solutions are not working, probably economic component should be highlighted, and the struggle of finding economic benefits can bring to political solutions and stronger peace efforts as well. I will stop here probably.
Thank you. And picking up the thread of promoting stability and peace, allow me to move to Dr. Yair Hirschfeld, Senior Lecturer, Middle East History at the University of Haifa, Israel, and advisor to Israeli-Palestinian Jordanian Peace Organization, ECHO Peace Middle East. Dr. Hirschfeld, based on your 50 years of experience advising on the peace process, what are your thoughts on the humanitarian and trade corridor? And in your view, what are some of the security and political consequences?
In the front, there you go.
Thank you very much for your question. Thank you very much, Armenia, for this wonderful meeting. And many thanks also to Resina Dialogue, which this is a follow-up. And the Resina Dialogue created a lot of initiatives that followed up, and I may relate to one or two of them. If you want to understand the political and strategic meaning of the connectivity in Gaza and the West Bank and Israel and Jordan, you have to understand that for Gaza, the future of Gaza, there are three different everybody wants humanitarian help. We do too little, but that's another issue. But there are three strategic concepts. Two are disaster, and one is the one we all want, I assume. The first one is a disaster if Israel will stay in Gaza for always and ever, and will try to control Gaza, and I don't know whatever. And people will leave. I assume you will agree with me, this is terrible. The second one is the more likely one, and European policy may lead to it. And I heard some things in the former session that may actually lead the way to Gaza, where Hamas remains an important actor. And if Hamas remains an important actor, this is the major, this will make it impossible to reach a two-state solution. It will make it impossible to take a clear path towards a two-state solution. Now, the path to a two-state solution has to go along with Israeli needs, with Palestinian needs, and the needs of the international community. And what I would like to argue today, and it will need more detail about it, that ECHO Peace has prepared a study that was written by a former Palestinian transport minister, Ali Shad, a former Palestinian head of the customs, and an Israeli economic. It's called the humanitarian and trade corridor, the humanitarian trade corridor to Gaza, based on the trilateral Israeli-Palestinian Jordanian triangle. And the basic study says some things that are quite simple but very decisive. It says that if we want to rebuild Gaza, you need to get humanitarian aid of per day, not what we have today, but you need 6,000 trucks going into Gaza daily. And we worked out its details, and the details make it very clear that Israel has to open up 11 border crossings, some from Jordan to Palestine, from Jordan to Israel, from Israel to Gaza, from Egypt. There are 11 entries that have to be opened up. And the idea that you can do that by Israel bashing and not taking care of Israeli security needs is absurd. And therefore, if we move this, well, if you get 6,000 trucks to get into Gaza, it means that you get economic development all over, and you can only do it in a regional context. In order to do it, you need the small amount, a little bit more than I have got in my pocket, of $120 billion. Now, there's no government that is going to give $120 billion, but if you look at the export, the foreign trade export of the United Arab Emirates, they have $600 billion foreign trade that they actually entertain. For the $600 billion to give $10 billion to Palestine that are needed in order to go ahead. You don't want to say it's peanuts, but it is something that makes sense within a regional economic structure. And the same is true for Saudi Arabia. You need the investment, the reconstruction of Gaza, the rebuilding of the West Bank economically. The path to a Palestinian state can only be in a wider regional context, because only in the wider regional context with trade connectivity, this is actually doable. And in order to do this, the organization to which I'm giving advice has worked much. We started actually 2020 on IMEC, on what became the Indo-Middle East European Corridor. In the meantime, I'll give you a short description of achievements that have been made. There are three people. There's the Israeli Gideon Bomberg, there's a wonderful Palestinian lady, Nada Majdalani, and the Jordanian lady, Yona Abu Talib. And they were together, they were for 2 months, were going from one place to the other. They started in Canada, and in Canada is opening in several weeks. They will have a meeting of the G7 and open the secretariat of IMEC. Then they went to the United States, had a meeting in the White House, had a meeting in the Congress, had a meeting in the Department of State, worked about the humanitarian corridor, got Trump's position of it, which I'll jump to it. The next stage was Italy. In Italy, they met Madame Meloni and her supporter and her chief advisor. They met the people of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And while Trump wants it without the Jordanian-Palestinian Israeli corridor, Madame Meloni wants it. And Madame Meloni actually went to the United States and discussed it with Trump, and she has the confidence of Trump. And he said, if you do it, I'll be fine with it, and we can go along. So you have IMEC. IMEC is basically the structure that needs to support it. Now, we believe, and for my French Minister of Foreign Affairs, this may be a tough message, but you should be aware of it. The IMEC as rebuilding Gaza, as building a structure, a security structure, political structure, is only possible if it is led by the triumvirate, President Trump, Madame Meloni, and von der Leyen. And I must say, I'll come to it, von der Leyen has done wonderful work. She does wonderful things, and she promotes it. And will
Thank you, Dr. Hirschfeld.
I'm finished?
Thank you. We'll come back to you.
Can I have
Sure.
2 more minutes?
1 more minute, please.
What we need is a secretariat. 2 more minutes. We need a secretariat. We need a secretariat of IMEC that will lead the governments of Gaza, where Israel and the United States will be in charge of security issues. The PA will be in charge. The PA will be in charge of social welfare, of health, of many other issues, and they have a very good government on these issues. The economic issues will have to be led by the Gulf states, and you need some kind of structure to organize it. We have to talk to the Europeans and to others how to develop this. We are still in the beginning, but by listening to the others, we find a way how to put this together. Thank you.
Thank you. Allow me to move to Dr. Joseph Karl Pelikan, Director of the Division of Regional Bureaus and Field Coordination at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNITO. Can you provide examples from UNITO's experience of successful technical assistance or regional cooperation projects that have strengthened trade competitiveness?
Thank you, Nada. Thank you for being here on this distinguished panel. Well, UNITO is the technical organization amongst UN family. Our mandate is based on SDG 9, Sustainable Development Goal 9, advocates for inclusive industry, future-oriented innovation and resilient infrastructure. And as mentioned by Mr. Kostanyan beforehand, I think challenges need to be followed by solutions. That's our starting point. We have 173 member states. We have 49 offices worldwide, 1 here in Yerevan. The office is led by Mr. Shiar Edelian, who sits here amongst the audience. And our motto is progress by innovation. And against this backdrop, we have many different projects here in the region. But just let me use one example. We have been supporting Armenia in revitalizing its garment industry by enhancing the human and technical capacities of manufacturers, improving the skills of local experts, and strengthening the country's technical support institutions. And over a 6-year period, the garment industry's turnover increased by 290%, exports by 328%, employment at beneficiary enterprises by 153%, and local sales by 270%. This is just one example how UNITO implements hands-on projects to improve resilience in the economic sector, and of course to improve sustainable supply chains. UNITO also established a light industry training service center, which is called Space 59, which enables local MSMEs to attract skilled professionals, incorporate innovative upgrading methodologies, and access high-quality technical services. And you can see that our initiatives are all designed to be relevant and scalable while strengthening Armenia's market access and innovation ecosystem. So there is also a programmatic frame to this work. We have a country program with Armenia, which has several elements, but roughly, and to save some time, it's concentrating on the green economy, on people and businesses. We work with SMEs, and we work with different sectors of the economy. And when trade connectivity is supported through tailored measures, it can also drive regional value chain development, trade diversification, and industrial upgrading, and inclusive economic growth across all borders. And in this respect, our projects, and I could continue because we have several more projects on stock, contribute to improving the economic situation and to face the challenges which were mentioned beforehand.
Thank you. I'll move now to Dr. Andreas Theopanos, President of the Center for European and International Affairs in Cyprus.
Thank you very much.
What was your experience in relation to economic cooperation with the European Union?
Well, there are many experiences I would like to share, but first of all, I want to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Armenia for this invitation to be here in this very important event to listen to expectations, analysis, and also share my perspectives. In relation with the European Union, well, Cyprus embarked on an accession process in the early 90s. Under difficult circumstances, the economics of the country was fine, but almost 40% has been occupied since 1974 by Turkey. Cyprus was successful in becoming a member of the European Union in the enlargement of 2004. And at the same time, because the reunification of the island was not achieved, the European Union wanted to promote, to encourage relations between Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. That was done through various projects, including promoting Green Line trade. Now, since 2004, what has happened, it did not support the hypothesis of the Turkish side that the two communities couldn't live together. There has been intermingling of that. There have been economic connections, economic relationships under difficult circumstances, and I'm talking about the occupation dimension. But one of the lessons is that although economics and trade and cooperation and projects are important, it's not enough to get you what you want. For example, in this case, to get you a peaceful solution of the Cyprus problem, because the key is in Ankara. Now, what has been our experience with the European Union in that? Although Cypriots feel very satisfied with the fact that we became a member in 2004, especially taking into consideration our circumstances and the area in which Cyprus is located. At the same time, there has been constructive criticism of Cyprus towards the European Union, meaning that we expected, we had higher expectations from the Union. We understand the limits of the European Union, but one thing that it's difficult to accept, it's double standards. What do I mean by that? European Union has reacted strongly when Russia invaded Ukraine. And there were sanctions, and correctly so, supporting a policy involving the implementation of international law. What has happened in the case of Cyprus? Whenever Cypriots are complaining about the Turkish occupation, they are criticized. And in addition to that, although there have been no sanctions for Turkey for its crime in Cyprus, I mean, there are many millions flowing to Turkey, various projects, corporations, and all that, without conditions. And we have here today, and we read also in the international press, that Turkey aspires to become a major part of the European security structure. Well, although for many Europeans, Russia is a major threat, for countries in the southeastern Mediterranean, I'm talking about Cyprus and Greece and others, the security threat is Turkey. And I think this is something which must be taken into consideration. And if major powers and institutions would enhance their activities and also have credibility, they must be consistent. You cannot have double standards. And this is something which is important. Perhaps we Cypriots must make sure that we project these realities beyond our countries so that they are known and that they are discussed. On many occasions in my capacity as president of the Cyprus Center for European International Affairs, I would be asked to write a report about this issue, for example, economic conditions, the right of Euroscepticism in various parts of Europe. And also recently I was really surprised when I received a letter invitation to write something about the security challenges of Europe. And I got also a 10 pages appendix. No single word about Cyprus, no single word about what Turkey has been doing in the island and the threats towards Greece as well. So this is something which we should keep in mind and that it should be addressed. It cannot be dismissed.
Thank you, Andreas. I will
you
move
too.
now to Dr. Kosh Araha, President of the Free and Open Indo-Pacific Forum, USA. Dr. Araha, how does the Indo-Pacific experience highlight the strategic value of connectivity for regional stability and economic integration?
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, good evening to all fellows. It's a Memorial Day, so it's a good day, a sober day. But I want to start before commending the outstanding arrangement by the Yerevan Group, ORF, and the MFA here. And thanks to you, Nada, for stepping in to moderate this panel. I think you were just told a few hours ago that that's what you ought to be doing. And thanks in particular to all the lovely young ladies who are helping us, lost souls, to work through this big hotel. It's an important topic. I think what happens in Indo-Pacific and how does that relate to Central Asia, Caucasus, Europe, economic corridor. It's to some degree is a story in Indo-Pacific, largely one of naval maritime connectivity. So I'll mention a little bit, but I think then pivot more to the land-based issues which are here. You can see in the Indo-Pacific, you hear a lot today, that more than half of the world's population, more than half of the world's GDP, and the fastest growing economies of the world are in Indo-Pacific. Keeping them free and open, as articulated by Prime Minister Abe, is the critical part in making sure that these economies are not only optimizing their own prosperity and security, but also become an engine for the rest of the world as they are. So the notion of free and open Indo-Pacific also expands now after the first Trump administration, the Biden administration, the second, to connecting the free and open spaces of the world, because that what works in Indo-Pacific is good for something else as well. And the most heartening development to that end is the connection between free and open Indo-Pacific and already a much freer Mediterranean and Atlantic, which is the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor that my good friend from Israel mentioned. So I think the biggest transformative connectivity initiative going forward is the Indo-Mediterranean sort of gravitation of economic forces, largely driven by India's growth as the largest, fastest growing economy, driven by Middle East need to be diversifying from its economy. And I think here, and Europe's need to diversify from China, I think that's be the biggest issue that'll drive this. And it'll have remarkably positive impacts. I was very heartened. It's the best thing I've heard. I've talked about it hypothetically, that how this will be the big thing for Gaza and West Bank and Palestinian and Jordan, Israel stuff. So it's very good to hear from you that you guys are already working on it and making that happen. How it relates to here, I think, in Armenia, and I gotta give a big push on not only the foreign minister here, but this pamphlet that they keep giving me every time I come here, the Crossroads of Peace. I think it's a brilliant idea, both I think in a rhetorical sense, in a geopolitical sense, and it's important that Armenia now shows in equal measure extraordinary courage and extraordinary vision. And it's helpful that that comes out of necessity more than choice. You've got to do this. And in so doing, you have very high and tough headwinds, which are both economic and political. It's not the easiest part to make strong economic arguments for the infrastructure that is needed to do this connectivity. They were the best thing going when land trade was the big deal. Now you got maritime as a very strong competitor, and you got other things happening in the Indo-Mediterranean side and the northern end of it. But this so-called middle corridor or Central Asia, Caucasus, Europe economic corridor, I think this has a tremendous benefit to retrain and transform the region. There are strong headwinds from what happens in Ukraine and Russia, strong headwinds and how the neighbors to your east and your west deal with you. But the future is good and needs to work on it. One few quick things that I'll mention and hopefully we can take in Q&A. When one comes to these discussions and talk about trade and connectivity, which is the driest, is like watching paint dry. It's a really dry subject. And then you start talking about one corridor, another corridor, and three corridors. By the time you lose the audience because they're lost in all the darn corridors, which some may go somewhere and say some may not. So it's really important to see where the economic heft and economic engine which makes these corridors somewhat more real than being talked about in among diplomatic or think tank events like this. That's a really important part, because otherwise we've been talking about corridors for 20 years. They haven't gone that far. And you talked a little bit about in your opening comments, Ms. Moderator, that, we're at the end of the world and somehow the multilateralism is done. Like everything in life, there's time for things and that things need to move and change. The multilateralism had some really good stuff. It didn't really do that fantastic about corridors. China was able to use it much better for its use than the rest of us to help Africa, help Central Asia, also help the Americas. So there is a new opportunity, as was mentioned by the foreign minister here, that when you look at these situations, there's tremendous opportunity for nimble and entrepreneurial folks to do well. And I think Armenia is a good example of doing so, and I hope we get into the details of that a little more in Q&A. But thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Araha. Allow me to go back to His Excellency Kostanyan. How does Armenia balance national interests with the goals of broader regional trade and transport integration?
Thank you for the question. In my belief, the confrontation which you put is in a way artificial. because it is our national interest to open the communications. But also we do understand that today there are, as it was mentioned, there are a lot of corridors or projects of the corridors which are competing to each other. So we do understand that we should have advantages which will economically and logistically create additional benefits for the possible passage through the territory of Armenia. And with this understanding, we announce that we are ready to do some simplifications of the procedures when it comes to not only west-east but also north-south passage. And even if I come back to politics, sometimes some bigger regulations in wider picture can unlock the bilateral questions that two states may have with regard to opening of the communications of a border. If I try to bring a couple of examples, what can work in our region. Now the European Union is working on a new strategy on Black Sea, and basically also wider strategy how to connect Europe with Central Asia and with China, with having unified customs regime, for example, for customs control. Is this something that we are interested in as Armenia? We are. Another example that I can bring on the regulations regarding to the roads, UN Economic Commission on Europe. It has different conventions which are facilitating the passage. And currently Armenia already started the inventorization of the conventions which can ease the opening of the communications and address some of the possible questions which might arise in the future, and will be ratifying these conventions step by step. But if you allow me also to elaborate on what we heard during the first round, so if I remember it correct, the title of this panel was more related to transport and economy and trade. But to me, I had a feeling that 80% of the time spent for the first round of the questions was about politics, and was about the context, was about the justifications why this didn't happen, the other thing didn't happen. But now the world is very fast and very quick. And in fact, even now when Armenia is complaining of having closed borders, there are some Armenian business people and logistical companies who are doing land transfer from China to Armenia and to Europe. Maybe we as decision makers or people who are giving advices to decision makers should less concentrate on the context and more concentrate on the execution. So put long story short, maybe business people are wise enough not to listen to us.
If I understand you correctly, that's first of all, thank you for your reflection. And if I understand you correctly, you're saying it's time for action, not just focusing on what the challenges are, what the context is, but what are you going to do about it?
Well, in fact, we are already out of track. But if we continue to speak about the excuses and context and justifications, it is not bringing anywhere.
Correct. Thank you for that. So allow me to move on now to Dr. Andreas Theopanos. Can I ask you, what are some of the lessons learned from Cyprus's experience working on bicommunal relations? And I will ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you. I think, you see, most Cypriots, after the invasion, they would say that the issue in Cyprus, it's one involving Cyprus and Turkey, the international dimension, which is fine, the most important, but at the same time, we could see that the issue, it has other dimensions, meaning the bicommunal, the Greco-Turkish, the European one, and so on. In the process, I came to the conclusion that you have, in order to get results accomplished, you have to move parallelly different aspects. So the Republic of Cyprus was successful in trying to improve bicommunal relations, and it did to a great extent. But at the same time, one of the major conclusions is that that's not enough, in the sense that no major decision can be reached by the Turkish Cypriots without Turkey. The other aspect is, and that's where we Cypriot Greeks must do a lot of work, is to make sure that we convey the right narrative beyond Nicosia, and also required the necessary actions. For example, I see no reason at all why, while Turkey promised to undertake a minimum obligation in 2005 before accession negotiations, European Union and Turkey, to implement the protocol of Ankara, meaning that it would extend customs union to Cyprus, and it didn't do that. And I think this is something that we should have been more forthcoming, and at the same time also, the European Union should have understood also the implications of keeping its own promises and so on. I think that in Cyprus, if we are successful in moving things forward, we can achieve much, in the sense that would help not only the population of Cyprus as a whole, but also the broader region, in the sense that I think a successful, peaceful coexistence in Cyprus could convey useful lessons in the broader area and beyond about the peaceful coexistence of Greek Cypriot Christians and Turkish Cypriot Muslims. And if there is no external interference, I think, and I'm talking about Turkey, and there is respect for the Republic of Cyprus, I think this can be achieved. And the European Union, because Cyprus is one of its members, it has to push in that direction accordingly. And to that extent, I think it did not exhaust possibilities, to put it very mildly and very politely.
Thank you. I'll move to Joseph. From UNITO's perspective, what are the most critical industrial and infrastructure bottlenecks affecting regional trade connectivity?
Thank you very much, Nada. I think I would like to connect what I say now to what Kosh said. Connectivity seems to be dry. Admittedly, if we just talk about corridors, this might be the case. But of course, if we delve ourselves a bit deeper into the topic, and if we consider preconditions of connectivity, I think we have to define the different layers of what it actually means and what could the bottlenecks be. And I think for us on a macro level, it's first the governments and international partners to foster modern human-centered industrial policies, investment strategies, and cooperative frameworks. On the meso level, it's the broad spectrum of intermediary and business support institutions we have to work with to foster the application of modern technology, quality infrastructure, and the compliance of it. And on a micro level, we have to assist micro, small, and medium enterprises to help them to meet the modern market requirements and to adopt innovative tools for greater competitiveness and value addition. And I think that's the overall bottleneck we have to face in our work. The region of Europe and Central Asia holds in principle great trade potential. Many countries aspire to enhance market opportunities. However, the challenges I mentioned, we are meeting complex requirements, compliance standards, and often hinder the capacities of the private sector, especially micro, small, and medium enterprises, to access regional and global markets and to expand their operations. And that's from UNITO's perspective, the most important points and bottlenecks we have to overcome. That's basically where we work with our project partners, the private sector, the government, on a long-term basis to overcome these bottlenecks and to create bottlenecks into opportunities. As I mentioned, this region has great potential to accelerate industrial modernization by leveraging its existing industrial base, the very skilled workforce and the geographic proximity to major markets, with strong technical foundations, an emerging ecosystem of startups, technology hubs, as well as a growing commitment to green and digital transition. This region is increasingly positioned to become a leader in smart manufacturing, Industry 4.0, and innovation-driven industrial transformation. And against this backdrop, I think the opportunities will overcome the bottlenecks.
Thank you, Joseph. Dr. Hirschfeld, in regions marked by instability, how can trade and transport be insulated from political shocks to ensure continued cooperation? And if I can ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes so we can have time to move on to the last panelist, please.
I'll give you an answer I want to give you. I believe you need a long-term, long telegram concept, which was proposed from the United Kingdom, to go slowly, knowing that there will be disruptions. But the European Union has to promote a four-pillar strategy. And the four-pillar strategy needs in the north the connection by Armenia from Central Asia, and Madame von der Leyen has $12 billion committed to you for this, and this is the first pillar. The second pillar is IMEC, which we spoke about. The third pillar is Israeli-Palestinian activities, where also von der Leyen has given $1.5 billion to the Palestinian government, which I believe is a good thing to do. And the fourth pillar is in Middle Syria and Lebanon. Due to the former meeting in Resina Dialogue, but due to many other developments too, there's now serious talk of building some kind of long telegram peace-building activities between Israel and Lebanon, maybe quicker, and Israel and Syria. And it's in between, because Syria and Lebanon balances the difficulties from the north with the difficulties from the south and prevents the Turkish-Israeli confrontation and allows this to do. Now, I can answer happily the question of His Excellency Deputy Minister of Armenia, Deputy Foreign Minister of Armenia, on the practicalities. I don't know how much time do you give me, but I can give you the paper and don't need the time basically. But we have a lot of experience on this. It's basically you have the containers, you have known traders. You check the containers where they get from the supplier. You put ships in there, and you have control of the container from door to door along. And on the border crossings, there are scanners. There's a lot of technical photographs, all kinds of structures, which you've all have done. And you need something else. You need control and intelligence stations where there's a coordination of intelligence activities. Basically, it should be in our case in Jordan, but it could be here also, maybe in Kazakhstan and also in Armenia and other places where there's an intelligence going on. With the combination of these technical issues and the coordination of intelligence, you actually can do quite a lot to control the disaster.
Thank you, Dr. Hirschfeld. Dr. Araha, one final question for you. In your view, how can countries with divergent interests still come together to develop regional trade corridors and shared protocols? You'll have 3 minutes, please.
Well, the answer is relatively straightforward. I mean, there's people in those countries put economic interest above the political one. It happens all the time, and it usually happens in parallel tracks. Let's take the example of Afghanistan and Pakistan and India. I mean, there was a lot of stuff, but there's trade happening between Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. Trade happens. Today, if you talk about IMEC, there's a good amount of trade going on from Basra to Secunderam. That happens. The trade was happening before through Israel. So there are several opportunities where this can happen. The question is, how can you merge them, and how can you elevate it to a level that the economic drivers somehow either counterweigh the political disagreements that may have? And I think that's the key. And Armenia is a good example of it. I mean, I think at this juncture, you can see the most interesting trade happening here is north-south. I mean, it's Iran, Armenia, Georgia, Russia. I think the question then for Armenia to become a true crossroads, it needs to have a kind of an agreement that works out with Azerbaijan and Turkey to some degree, and that allows it to become a crossroads. We hear a lot about folks around here in Turkey. I mean, you can see the sort of this two tensions playing out in Turkey. Turkey is absolutely central, integral to any of these trade routes, everywhere from IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, to Central Asia, Caucasus, Europe Economic Corridor. But it has to balance its economic interest and all the things that are happening under the table with his political pronouncements, which are oftentimes contrary to his interest to playing an important role in this context. So these are tensions that happen. This is where our good foreign minister gets to earn his pay, to sort of do the nimble dance and make sure how you can, as he rightly said, let's forget the context. Let's work on these things. And I want to mention on the context of stuff. From the American side and the Indian side, I mean, India, Pakistan does not stop IMEC to go forward. Neither does some degree Hamas and Israel. They are moving forward on this. The economic gravitational will take it further. And I think you got to go with the economy, is have this discussion more on the economic basis rather than political and contextual one. Let me give you two sort of points on that. I was with my Japanese colleague yesterday in Bucharest. So I was on one side and then Constanza. On the one side of the Black Sea, now we are here. It took us a long way to get here. And Japan just opened, the Japanese DFC, the Development Finance Institution, JBIC, just opened a shop, an office in Warsaw. That tells you the economic gravity of how Poland-driven 3Cs initiative is sort of taking to reality. You would want those sort of investment from Japan and South Korea happening in this region, and that will change it. In our first Trump administration, we try to do that with Georgia, with having a DFC office there and work it out. Things have changed, but Armenia is in a good place to lead the effort.
Thank you. I have one final question for Your Excellency. If you have advice for any other country, because I've honestly, hearing remarks by yourself and the ministers this morning, and your commitment to peace has been very, very strong. What is one critical policy or investment priority that must be addressed by a country wanting to improve regional trade and transport connectivity?
Well, quite a difficult question, actually. I do believe that, of course, we are speaking about economy a lot, or we were speaking about politics a lot, and I was one who was complaining that we're not speaking about economy enough. But there is some truth that political decisions matter, and this is also a matter of political courage. If it's about one advice, that everyone should exercise the necessary political courage to enable economic growth and the economic prosperity.
Thank you. And that concludes our panel for today. Please join me in thanking our distinguished speakers.